Hello, welcome to our NextGen HR webinar. We're very pleased you're joining us today, and we thank you very much for accommodating our date change. We are ready to begin. I'm Virginia with Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations, and I will be your host and moderator. We encourage everybody to send us any questions you may have. To do so, you will click on the orange arrow that you see on your screen. You will type your questions in the question box and press send at any time. We will respond to all questions at the end of the webinar. Our webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you via email by the end of this week. It's now my pleasure to introduce our instructor. Lori McIsaac is a Senior Program Manager here at Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations. Lori specializes in leadership development and change management, and Lori has worked with both small and medium-sized organizations as well as many Fortune 500 companies over her almost 25-year career. Lori, please take it away.
Thanks, Virginia, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted you've joined us today to talk about NextGen HR. So the objectives for our webinar are as follows. We're going to understand what these challenges that we've been facing in our function with the next generation of human resource management coming upon us. We're going to talk about some insights and some skills that we will need to meet those challenges. And we'll also learn some skills that develop an action plan for our organization for success in our ever-changing function. So what are these challenges that we're all facing and have been facing for quite some time as human resource management has been evolving? Well, the first has to do with a rapidly changing workforce. The dynamics of our workforce are no longer as they used to be. We have lots of different people from lots of different generations and cultures, and that has really challenged us in human resources. We've also begun to have access to unprecedented amounts of data. Big data, as we've heard it called, is certainly here to stay, and let's talk about how we can use it to our advantage. Additionally, we've really become barraged with constant technological advancements. Every time we turn around, there is something new, whiz-bang, happening in the technology field that seems to impact our talent pool in our organizations, and therefore we have to be aware of it and learn how we can respond to it in a positive way. And finally, again, with technology, there's social media and the different platforms out there that have really intersected with our organizations and our networks, and how do we make those things work together so that we can streamline and find ourselves improving performance, improving engagement and retention, and really having a successful organization from a talent standpoint. So when it comes to the impact that all of these challenges have had on HR, what is it that we need to do now? So first, that multi-generational, diverse, and very flexible workforce we mentioned. They are here to stay, and so as an HR function, we really need to think about new talent acquisition approaches. From that big data and analytics idea, they are measuring our human capital investments in all different ways. So we, as a function, really need to have some new talent measurement to be sure we're getting that return on our investment. The technology piece has really obsolesced our HR strategies and programs, and so as an organizational function now, HR really has to have a different and new talent mindset in terms of how we approach our talent in the future. And finally, that social media and network piece is definitely not going away, but it has permanently altered how we as HR look at the skills we bring to the table to be successful. So we need some new talent skills. So what is it as a function we can do? That's what we're here to talk about. Virginia, let's ask the group a question.
Okay, so our first poll question is, which of these challenges do you experience the most today? I'm going to launch the poll, and if you can take a moment and make your selection. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. Lori, we have 83% chose rapidly changing workforce dynamics, 17% unprecedented amounts of data available, and no one chose constant technological advancements or proliferating social media, and organizational networks.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your participation. That is certainly what we hear in the marketplace as well. We hear lots of discussion about those workforce dynamics that are changing, and then also the pieces around what to do with data. So let's talk about those as we go forward in the webinar today. As we mentioned, in order to do the things we need to do to be more effective as HR professionals, we probably need some competencies that will allow us to be successful. Now, the first competency we'll talk about, of course, is engagement. Now, engagement is a term that, quite frankly, we've heard for too long with too many definitions. I think what I'm trying to say today is that we need to find impactful ways to engage our employees, ways that are creative and perhaps different than we've thought of in the past. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like when we talk about this diversified and flexible dynamic workforce that you folks all mentioned you'd like to have a conversation about. We want to differentiate the workforce in a way that is meaningful to them. So if we're working as partners with our business units within our companies, we need to think about what is different about the workforce at different levels of generation, different levels of skill, different levels of learning, and how do we help our business partners understand that the differentiation of their workforce from our perspective will help them get improved productivity and improved performance. We need to think about, again, this whole idea of how do we make our human resource function electronic and mobile. Perhaps many of us have done that already, and that's terrific ways to stay on top of it. The data to improve performance. Again, what is it about the data that we need to learn about our people, keeping it in a storage capacity and utilizing it across the organization to improve how people perform and to help our managers know what to do with that data to drive proper requests from us when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to retaining, and when it comes to training. All of those things will help us be better business partners. And again, the social networks, I'm sure we've all come up with different ways to engage the outside universe through social networks, but we want to really think about how it connects with our day-to-day workforce development and planning. Okay, let's ask another question, Virginia.
Okay, poll question number 2. Which HR competency do you want to improve the most? I'm going to launch the poll. If you can take a moment. And I'm going to close the poll, share the results. Lori, 36% chose engaging employees, 7% differentiating the workforce, 21% making HR electronic and mobile, 32% using data to improve performance, 4% managing social networks.
Very good. All righty. Well, thanks again for your participation. That's helpful to get a sense of where everybody is at and the kinds of things that they're finding challenging today. So let's talk specifically about these 5 areas in terms of what kinds of skills and approaches we want to think about going forward. So first, engagement. Lots of folks were interested in this, and again, it's a very important part of human resource management, we know, but what is it we can do a little bit differently for that impactful engagement I mentioned? So we must think about, as an HR professional, obviously recruiting people that have these kinds of skills, and I'll call them mindsets as well. Skills are really much more measurable, and a lot of these areas are more of a mindset or an approach to work. Definitely effective communicators and effective collaborators. Now, again, when we think about what is collaboration, it's really the ability to work with multi-level stakeholders across an organization, both within our own networks and outside. And some people have good experience with that, and some people don't. And we're going to want to really bring in folks who are expert there. Creative and innovative is just a critical area of expertise that we want to bring into our organization for improved engagement. If people have the opportunity to be creative, to find innovative ways to improve what they do, to help their managers and their employees, then they're going to want to be engaged and stick around in the organization and add value. How do we make sure that the climate that our organizations are creating are fostering that kind of creativity and innovation? And as HR professionals, we really need to work with our business partners to think about ways to do that. Critical thinking and problem solving, what is it we can do to engage our managers to say, you know what, the people out there need to be able to be challenged through critical thinking and problem solving. So not just once in a while find a new project for them, but in their day-to-day work that they do, what is it as a part of a team that they can bring to the table and be open and invited to bring to the table ways to solve problems. And continuous learning goes without say. I think we've been really talking about it as a function forever, but right now, if you look at that great graphic down below, the idea that people who are just not interested or able to learn are definitely going to have a disadvantage in organizations today. What your job is today really might change radically in the next few months, and what is it that we as HR professionals can do to help those managers, bring their employees along in the learning curve, not just training programs. What opportunities for mentorship? What opportunities for really helping others to learn in the organization by putting them in visible spots and having them attend different meetings and networking with other folks in the organization. All the ways that we can bring those tools to managers can help them engage employees. So engagement is definitely here to stay, but let's do it in an impactful way. That differentiated workforce, I won't spend too much time on, but I do want to touch on the fact that we all know we have a core workforce, and we all know that there's a non-core workforce or more of a supplemental workforce out there. And we've looked at these items along the yellow circle here, but I just want to focus on a couple that I think are sort of interesting and new in our mindset. And the first one would be that on demand. How do we bring people in as we need them, when we need them? What kind of partnership, employment opportunity, or hiring practices can we have that allow us to think about that on demand or that temporary employee? We've all had contractors, we've all had consultants. That isn't new, and we certainly all have partners, but it might be really on a 3-month or 6-month project, and how can we really use temporary and on-demand workers to help us? But I also want to mention retirees. I find, as someone in the workforce, back to our multi-generational workforce, there are so many people out there that have so much value to add, particularly in the areas of mentorship and areas in that they may have had skills that they've just come to a place of retirement, but their skills are still valuable. Bringing in folks from a subject matter expertise to come and do lunch and learns with people from a younger generation, or vice versa. How do we bring those people together? Just think about it supplementing our workforce in a way that allows us to add value to our business partners out in the organization. This trend is really an important one, and it allows us to think about how do we be flexible and how do we focus. But let's not forget, we don't have all the answers. Let's ask our people out in the workplace. Let's ask our business managers and business unit heads, what are you looking for? And what are you focusing on? And how can we bring that to the table as HR professionals in a flexible way? Back to the electronics and HR going mobile, we know it's existing out there. It's been going on for a while, but I think we have to ask ourselves a couple more times, do we have the processes and the workers to be successful in getting the advantages that this revolution that we've seen is really offering us? So if you think about the caveat, some of the problems we may have not yet addressed in our organizations around the right skills and the right processes, let's make sure we shore those up before we really try to take advantage of all the benefits that the electronic and mobile revolution are going to provide. And the way to do that really is to talk to business partners, talk to the business managers out there. Do they have processes that are not working? Do they have the right process improvement skills? Whether they have the Lean Sigma programs, or do they have the right green belts? Do they have the right process consultants to come in, re-engineer, and make sure they're where they need to be so that they can take advantage of electronic and mobile technology to make those processes work more effectively? I know we've done a lot of this in the organizations, but I think it's important to say, if we want to take it to the next level, let's make sure that we are offering those resources to our business partners in the workplace. Okay, so here we are. Big data, talent analytics. We've been hearing it for a long time, and we all really want to figure out how to take advantage of it, because we've seen our colleagues in marketing and information technology and customer service really dig in, use data to leapfrog their productivity and their performance. I think this graphic really tells the story. If you think about the fact that there are 78% of this Deloitte survey of the companies that were asked, they are rating talent analytics as an urgent or important matter in their organization today. But if you think about it, it's one of the most top urgent trends, but only 8% at top end on the right-hand side of your screen really feel that they are excellent at doing this. The majority of people feel that they're competent or perhaps even a little bit weak, that they know what they need to do or they understand it, but they just have not taken advantage of it. And if you think about competitive advantage, where can human resource management really earn that seat at the table? And this is an area we've got to get our arms around. We at Rutgers here for the School of Management Labor Relations talk about it in all of our programs, credit programs, executive education programs, and the question becomes, what data do we need? And once we capture it, how do we inject it back into the organization to measure the return on investment that we're getting on our talent? And, you know, again, the tools to do so, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, are tools we've seen before, but we've not always had the most data to populate those tools and make them effective. Scorecards, planning tools, business performance tools, and workforce improvement tools are all things we know about. And as we put learning management systems into place and try to really give them that turbocharged value in our organization as HR professionals, we've got to work with business leaders to make sure what we are measuring on this data side is actually what they're looking for. And that connects with the whole idea of social networks. Now, again, social media is important, but connecting with our organizational networks is the most important part of social media. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, being involved in all the social media platforms for the sake of being involved is interesting, but not really good enough. Because if you think about the fact that firms are really made up of these people that work together, and that they end up connecting to human capital, which would be those skills and those knowledge areas, those expertise. Those people that fit in the boxes of an org chart really need to also connect both inside and outside to take advantage of that return on investment. What is it about the human capital in our organization that we can define, measure, and then help business managers in the field figure out how to improve? That's the true value of social networking, making sure that we recognize that the boxes on an org chart are what's important for defining how the organization is going to work together, but putting the right people in those boxes and connecting those people with the outside of the organization in terms of networking is really how you gain value from harnessing social media in our organizations today. As I mentioned, it's moving outside. It's saying this academic personnel manager that I've got circled here has to connect not just with everybody in her organization, but she needs to find those points of intersection outside her day-to-day work that says, if I can connect with these people, I can bring more value back into the organization, that social capital, we talk about it, to create those clusters between our organization and the outside world. And then she can go within her organization and create more value. It's really a process that we need to keep our business managers aware of, but helping them to work with in a streamlined, smooth way. And the more facile we are, the more value we can add. All right, Virginia, let's see if we have any questions. I think we've sort of discussed a lot of things today and had some good ideas on the polling, looking at areas of engagement and areas of workforce differentiation and data. Let's see what kind of questions may have come up.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, Lori, thank you so much. This was a great presentation and very informative and interesting. We are receiving some questions. So our first one is, how do we help managers engage employees who don't want to continue learning?
Wow, that's a very good question. You know, it seems kind of strange to imagine people who don't want to continue learning, but I've taught enough programs in my time in the human resource management space where I've had participants from the workforce say to me, you know, there's just some of those people who do not want to continue to learn, but they're valuable employees because they still add value to the workplace because they do their job. They're my solid day-to-day performers. So I guess the definition of learning is something that I would recommend you think about when you come up against these kinds of employees, because they all exist out there, and they're not necessarily just the older generation of workforce. They could be any of those levels of generation. The idea of learning doesn't have to be about a training program or an online course. What it has to be is about what kinds of things are you now interested in, are you passionate about? And if you're passionate about something, then you can bring that to the organization. For example, there are times when we find people to be passionate about areas that we don't think connect with our organizations, but if we find a way to have them bring things from the outside in that they really love, it might add more value to the organization. So asking them on a one-on-one to really think about their passions and how do their passions drive their engagement, not about what new training program they can go to. And again, these social media connections within the organization, maybe there's an opportunity for some sort of a club or a network within your organization that brings people like them together that say, I'm just not so necessarily needing of a training program, but I'm needing of an idea to brainstorm ideas of how can I be better at what I do. So thinking about those kinds of things versus just pure training solutions can help us broaden learning and keep those people engaged.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question is, how do we know what data we need to be successful?
Well, that's a very basic and terrific question. And I think the answer is sort of obvious, but we all forget it sometimes in the midst of all the things we have to do and the amount of data we get access to. We really have to ask our business partners in the organization, what is it you'd like to know more about in terms of measurement? And then we have to sit down as a function in HR and say, what do we really have access to? Employee data, employee engagement data, employee development data, employee retention data, not just the standard turnover data or exit interview data that we have, but what can we track week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter in our organization about how our people are doing, how successful they are, where they're struggling, and where they need assistance. And that's a combination of talking to business leaders in the field, out there about what their people need, and then talking to our own HR teams inside and thinking about ways we can define the data and capture the data. Now, HR has a little bit of a disadvantage compared to obviously marketing or customer service. We're not measuring data all day long, but if we can find the right areas that we want to measure by talking to business leaders and talking to our colleagues, we define those points, we find ways to capture them within our learning management system and measure them and track them for improvement. I think we're going to be very successful.
Great. Our next question is, what tips do you have for integrating a multi-generational team?
Yeah, that really is an important piece of what we have to do today, because we want everyone to feel engaged and we want everyone to feel a part of the organization, and they're adding their own unique value. And one of the things I've seen pretty successfully in some of the clients that I work with has to do with not really a true mentoring program, but it's called sort of a partnering or a pairing program where folks from a different generation of technology, for example, have partnered and paired with someone who might be less savvy or less aware of how to use technology to their advantage. And basically opening up a dialogue and bringing people together to say, you know what, we're going to have the millennials, work with the more seasoned employees around technology and networking in that way. But I've also seen it go the other direction, where we'll say I'll have our more seasoned folks work with our millennials on very basic things like how do you conduct an effective interview? How do you conduct an effective meeting with a business partner or someone outside our organization? It may seem obvious, but a lot of these folks from the younger generations have just not had the experience of face-to-face, appropriate sort of meeting etiquette, interview questions, follow-up, from a personal one-on-one standpoint that doesn't involve an electronic device. So partnering and pairing programs may really be a way to do so. And also, I think a lot of it has to do with the communication mechanisms we use in our organization to reach people. Are we only doing sort of newsletters that might be electronic, or are we doing email blasts? Are we doing face-to-face meetings with, lunch and learns? Or having a multi-generational communication strategy will engage us in our work with our multi-generational workforce to make sure everybody feels that they have a place and value to add. And again, lastly, what I say all the time, let's ask them. Let's send a survey out and find out, what ways would you like to engage with each other? What ways do you find might be helpful? And you'd be surprised, because people are so involved because of social media and networking these days in their volunteer organizations, in their, recreational activities, that they have all these unique ways that they keep in touch with, and they bridge those gaps in their work outside the organization and in their personal lives, that they can bring some unique ideas of how we can do it better as an organization. And as HR, we really want to invite those conversations as most often as we can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lori. We're getting a lot of really great questions. We only have time for one more. So if we do not address your question in the webinar, we will be contacting you by email with the answers to your question. So our last question, Lori, is how does the program apply content from class to real business issues in companies? Example, are business cases or simulations part of the program?
Great question. And yes, they are. We do a lot of case studies that, even if they're not lengthy, they're multiple of them. So we'll do a quick vignette or a scenario study where we say, this is the situation that the HR manager is facing. Here are some options. How do you make it work? And then the individuals will work in table teams to come up with some creative solutions. They'll present them to the group, and then the group will talk about their ideas, but the professor, the instructor, will give, quote, the best answer, so to speak, in terms of success, and really try to troubleshoot some of the areas with that. Yes, we do that in all of the modules. The gamification module is one where we really do get an opportunity to learn about how we can apply that particular technology to an area of our organization, which happens to be onboarding, one of the areas that really works with. And again, the HR mobile piece also has some jump in case study scenarios where we do that. So yes, that's a great question, and it is the way in which we engage folks for the program. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that was our last question that we're going to address in our webinar. Do we want to go to our next slide?
Sure. Okay, so we really appreciate your time. I know it's busy out there, and coming together around this topic is very encouraging and exciting, because we think it's really where the function is heading. As you know from the email that you received from Virginia, we do have a program coming up in early December, and it's called our Master Certificate for NextGen HR. It's a one-week program here in Piscataway at our Rutgers campus, and we are offering you a discount to attend the program, 20% for any or all of the modules. It is a 10-module, 5-day program that runs morning to afternoon, as you see, and we are delighted to have you for any or all of those modules to drop in or to join us for the week and earn the certificate, but in either way to really engage with each other as HR professionals, with us and our faculty here at Similar School of Management Labor Relations at Rutgers, and we really would hope to see some of you there. So thanks for joining us today.
Great, thank you, Lori. Thank you all once again for your participation in our webinar. This does conclude our webinar. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending you a link to the recording by the end of next week. And if we didn't get to your questions today, we will be sending you an email with the answers. We hope to see you in our future programs. And for more information, our website is epe.rutgers.edu. Thank you. Bye-bye.